Now, in this week's Let's Talk Some Star Wars video, I want to talk about what should have been done with the expanded universe after Disney took over, and if by wiping it away, which was the first real major decision Disney made, that just immediately got themselves off on the wrong foot with some of the most loyal and dedicated fans. Because, as I argued in the discussion starter video, and the link to it will be in the description below, there were some who had of course been following the expanded universe for literally decades, pouring their love, time, and money into it, only to ultimately be told it was no longer canon and stories would no longer be told in it. And as we take a look at the poll from this week, 55% of people feel as if the expanded universe should have been used as an outline for the new canon, changing very little, while another 14% said it should have been used as a more vague outline, changing much. While 19% of people thought it should have been left completely intact, and that the new movie should have been fit into the expanded universe the way it was. All told, that's 88% of the 22,000 people who voted that feel as if the expanded universe really should have lived on. Only 10% of people were actually in favor of what Disney actually did choose to do, which was to scrap it entirely, yet be willing to eventually bring some elements of it back. And yes, as usual, I will make my little disclaimer here that those numbers could be, and likely are, somewhat skewed based on the fact that many who watch my videos have not been fans of Disney Star Wars thus far. So perhaps what this poll really begins to confirm is one of the main reasons why that's been the case, why people haven't been happy with it. And that's because they feel as if what Lucasfilm is now creating under Disney is not as good as what had already been in place before they took over. That the post-Return of the Jedi stories given to us thus far by J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson are not as good or as enjoyable as those created by multiple other authors over the past few decades. Though, at the risk of sounding like I'm defending Johnson and Abrams, which I'm not, writers of the expanded universe did have the luxury of knowing they were creating stories almost exclusively for Star Wars fans, whereas movies need to have a much broader appeal. Nevertheless, care should be taken when creating a movie in such a beloved franchise, care that you try and make a movie that fans can and will appreciate, yet will still be understood and enjoyed by the average moviegoer. That really should be the goal of any Star Wars movies, to find that perfect blend. And yet we repeatedly heard Rian Johnson say it's not about the fans, and no surprise, here we are now with a split fanbase, where many are clearly lamenting the days of the expanded universe, when authors very much wanted to make stories for them. And that didn't mean it was all just bad fan fiction or pandering to the fans. Quite the opposite, really. Much of the expanded universe was fantastic. And what Rian Johnson failed to understand is that you can still make a movie for fans, and yet completely subvert their expectations. I'll just point at Avengers Infinity War, rest my case, and move on to the top-rated comment from the poll, which came to us from Ice Yard Fan, who said, "They should have kept everything before Episode 1, Bane, Revan, etc., but only use the expanded universe as an outline past Episode 6, so that you can do original stories. But hire actual good writers who care about Star Wars." And well, the good news is that there's still hope that they could pretty much keep everything pre-Episode 1 mostly intact, because they haven't really dipped into that time period at all in the new canon. In fact, I'd be really surprised if when they do go back to the Old Republic, and yeah, I fully feel that's a when and not an if, I think they'll keep most things unchanged. I mean, I'd have to imagine Revan will be one of the first things they'll make canon, and there's really no reason to try and reimagine that story too much. Okay, let's now move on to the top comment from the video, which came to us from Jaden Nova, who said, "These canon books are just damage control for poor script writing. An accompanying book is supposed to enhance the film, not act as a requirement for the movie to make sense." And though this is actually a different topic altogether, it is a statement I absolutely agree with. I mean, sure, I enjoy reading all the canon books and having the story fleshed out even further, but there should never be anything in those books, or comics, or games, or whatever else it might be, that explains something that should have been made clear in the movie. The best recent example of this is in the novelization of The Last Jedi, where it gets explained that Rey had basically downloaded her training from Kylo Ren's mind. And no, I'm not exactly saying that explanation should have been in the movie, because that explanation's terrible and it shouldn't have been anywhere, but one should have been given in the actual movie, because how she was able to use the Force so proficiently in The Force Awakens was a big mystery that deserved at least some type of answer in the next movie. But before I get too deep into that topic, let's move to a comment from DFlowers30, who said, "They didn't have to cancel it. They could have kept it going as a separate brand from their canon. Marvel does it, DC does it. Why couldn't Star Wars? So many great stories came from Legends, the Darth Bane trilogy, the Darth Plagueis novel, Legacy of the Jedi series. We deserve to see more of these stories continue. They were working on Sword of the Jedi, a story about Jaina Solo, when they canceled it and I'm still mad. And this is truly the million-dollar question, almost literally. Why did Disney cancel the expanded universe entirely when they still could have made money from it? Because yes, I can understand not wanting to beholden yourself to decades of lore while making your new movies, while trying to put your stamp on Star Wars and trying to do your own thing with it. I can understand wanting to make a new timeline, if you will. But why cancel the expanded universe to do that? I mean, I've heard some say something to the effect that they didn't want to compete with themselves or confuse fans as to what's actual canon and what isn't. But the EU books are still being published today with the Legends label on them, which means they still compete with their new canon books. They sit right next to them at the bookstore, in fact, and have that Legends label branded all over the cover, which should be all most Star Wars fans need to realize it's not part of the new canon. So I again ask, why did it get canceled? Why didn't you let writers continue to create within it and continue to make money from it? Was it really that they were afraid it was going to continue to be better than what they were coming up with for the new canon? And if that's the case, they still need to make something better than what the EU had already put out there to, in a sense, justify telling new stories and not keeping what they already had. And this poll really begins to suggest many fans don't feel that's been happening. And as True Soul basically says, it is okay to have more than one timeline. Many other companies do this. And the simple truth is, you need to make your new stories good no matter what, because there is, of course, other competition from other franchises already out there, and that will always seek to dethrone you. Not that Star Wars is the king of anything right now, other than missed opportunities, perhaps. And if you did have two different timelines running, and they were both great, you might be able to make double the money off book sales, or even do something like what Cole Kenny suggested in his comment, and make animated movies out of some of the more beloved stories from the expanded universe, not unlike what DC does with some of their alternate timelines. I just don't get it, Disney and Lucasfilm. There were so many ways to still make money off the EU and keep fans of it happy while pushing on with your new canon. And by getting rid of it, you were basically telling us fans you were going to do much better with the new canon. This was one of the many great points Brian Borg made in his comment, which I'm not going to read because it's a tad on the long side, but I will instead encourage you to pause the video and read it yourself. Lastly here, I'd like to get to a comment from Argobot on my Discord server who had this to say. If Disney had indeed used the EU for canon, they would have had some awesome stories to tell. But it would have gotten a ton of crap like big books to movies typically get. I call it the Tolkien effect. They would inevitably fail to reproduce something properly and the fans would hate it. As much as I, a reader of 80 to 90% of the EU, hates to admit this, it's good they swept it aside. But it sucks royally that authors and writers of the EU are forbid from continuing it. Really, I'm all for multiple timelines and stories. I'm not going to get confused by different ones because I'm not going to even care about Disney's canon. And maybe that's the problem. They didn't want to lose money to the EU as insignificant as it would have been grand scheme. And now they are losing money at a much higher rate by letting Star Systems slip through their fingers as they tighten their SJW grip. It's unfortunate to me. I absolutely love Star Wars, but no longer do I absolutely love everything Star Wars, and that makes me sad. And perhaps in his comment here he begins to shed light on the real reason Disney didn't go with the expanded universe. They knew they couldn't get it perfect, and they'd rather risk that fans were unhappy with something completely new than unhappy with them trying to bring to the screen something they already loved and completely butchering it. That of course still doesn't explain why you didn't let the EU continue on in books though. And personally here, I would have opted to keep the general outline of the EU intact for the sequel trilogy before moving on to other times and places that the EU had never touched so that I could do something original and new. I would not have risked the ire of some of the most dedicated Star Wars fans out there. I would have gone out of my way to honor all the reasons they love Star Wars in the first place, to say, we understand what Star Wars is, what it means to you, and we will treat it with the care and respect it deserves, long before I did anything to really tamper with it. Anyway, before I end this a bit earlier than I'd like to because I'm still not feeling the best and it feels as if my voice is going, I just again want to thank everyone who votes in the polls and leaves comments either on those polls or on the corresponding videos, or any of my videos really, or on my Discord server. It's a dream come true to be able to talk Star Wars with so many of my fellow fans, and I'm always open to suggestions on how to make these videos or any of my videos better. I'd love to make this channel even more interactive. So if you enjoy these types of videos and would like to see more of them, please let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that's all I've got for this time. Now is of course your turn to tell me what you think about anything I or anyone else had to say in this video. So please leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.